Listen up. There's no more excuses.
We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, we've got a real treat. Elise Micheals is in the house. Elise is a female disruptor, speaker, coach, influencer, and she provides mindset and mental health coaching specifically for men. She struggled with mental health issues for most of her life and didn't understand why. With her own exploration in trauma therapy, relationship science, neuroscience, NLP, and therapy of her own, she was able to pinpoint the cycles of behavior that ultimately always led her to demise. Now, Elise helps men, and many men have been silenced when it comes to their emotions. This causes their struggles to be compounded and makes it even more difficult to process. Elise, this is a really interesting subject, not for us, but a lot of listeners out there, because I feel like everybody at some point has had some kind of mental health issues, has gone through their ups and downs, certainly trauma. I'm really excited to listen to what you have to say today. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. What an introduction. Thank you.
Well, I don't write all those. I pull a lot of those from websites and bios, but I would love for you to tell our listeners who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Elise. I'm a men's mental health coach, and I help men find purpose and passion again by healing any subconscious trauma that they have.
So that's interesting. Tell us how you got to this, because I'm guessing that this wasn't something your guidance counselor suggested when you were in high school.
No. I know, and I've laughed because it wasn't a career that I targeted and said, I'm going to help men. And that's what I'm going to do, like you said, when you graduate high school. Like it said in the introduction you just had, I went through a lot of struggles on my own, and I was getting very frustrated. Why can't I just figure this out? After a certain period of time, you see the same cycles in yourself. If you're someone who works really hard, you're into self-development, you read all the books, you listen to the audios, you watch the YouTubes, you're into Lewis Howes and Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan, and you're like, I'm an expert on all the things, and yet I can't fix myself. And it wasn't until I actually took courses in trauma therapy and understanding the brain and understanding how to break patterns that I really realized there are patterns in your brain for healing relationship struggles and for healing self-destructive habits. And once I figured it out for myself, I just said, I have to share this with the world. And it was only men who reached out to me for help. So that's how I started working with men.
Why is that men? Why do you think that is?
I've been asked this a few times. I don't necessarily know. I think it's just because I spoke about things in a more logical manner that I think men really gravitate towards because they like action over vocab. So I think just the way that I wanted to solve things in my own therapy sessions was eventually I just needed a homework assignment or something. I wanted to do something. I wanted to see tangible results for what I was learning. And I think because that's how I portrayed the lessons, that men gravitated towards that as something very familiar with what they were used to learning and doing.
You said actions versus vocab. Do you think women are different in that regard?
I think women are more socialized into discussing their feelings and to talk things over and to think about things. And men are socialized not to do. They're just socialized to do the exact opposite of that. So for them, they just want to figure it out. And they want to, skip over and bypass the feeling and the talking. And I'm not saying that's what my coaching does is hey, we're going to bypass all the feeling bad. But it's, really incorporating what we already know, and using that to our advantage with how we can learn something new, because we can't just force men to learn the same way that women learn.
So one of the things that was really intriguing to me, Elise, was even as you talked about not just men, but even the type of men in many cases that you're focused on and helping, right? That kind of middle-aged family man, businessman, leader with, pressures coming from so many different directions. One of the things we talk a lot about with hustle is there's a lot of behaviors we can follow to be successful, but it all starts with our head, right? And if you don't have the right mindset to start. So as you look at kind of people that fit that demographic, what are the unique things that you've seen or kind of consistent trends you've seen in that group relative to, not being able to understand really what mental state they are? Because, it seems to me that so many people in that space, if you asked them, they wouldn't say they even have a problem. Right. But that doesn't mean they don't. Right. So I don't know if you could speak to that.
Right. So and I'm just going to preface this by saying that all of us have something that we can work on. It's not just, oh, the men I work with are like so messed up. Like, you don't have to go to a therapist and be like totally fucked up to go to one. You just want to have self-improvement. You want to understand yourself on a more intellectual level. So a lot of entrepreneurs are just so focused on work that it allows them to dissociate from the other problems in their lives. So from what I've seen, the men who are fantastic entrepreneurs, the men who, have created very wealthy businesses and successful lives for themselves are masters at ignoring and compartmentalizing the problems in their lives with relationships, with family, with emotions. They've been able to shove down the things that bother them because they're so focused on something else. And then it usually happens when they've reached the peak of that mountain of success and they have nothing left to distract them, that all the crap that they were suppressing all of a sudden pops back up. And that's when they feel lost. That's when they feel like the midlife crisis. That's when they feel their relationship crashing down. But because for years they were so masterful at ignoring it because of this goal, but now the goal is gone. And what do you have left?
Do you think any of that might have to do with the fact that some people, specifically men, feel like their spouse, their girlfriend, their family, their friends, whoever, public might love them more or like them more if they get to that pinnacle of success? They make more money, they get more buff, or whatever it is that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Society has socialized men and women in different categories. If you do this, you will get more love, success, validation. For women, it's how do you look? How do you present yourself in public? How much of a trophy can you be on someone's arm? And for men, it's like, how successful can you be to get the trophy? And it puts both of us, a lot of pressure on both of us to ignore the internal work that we should do to actually keep a partner or to find internal happiness and to seek it elsewhere.
That's awesome.
So how do you get through? I mean, as you're working with new clients, are you finding that they already acknowledge that a lot of what their challenge is or what their issue is that they need to deal with, or is it just they don't feel right and they know something's wrong, but they don't really know what's driving it?
Right. They're usually just at a rock bottom of, I don't know what to do. It's kind of like coming to me is kind of like a Hail Mary. Like, I would say I feel bad for saying that, but like for a lot of men, it takes a lot. You got to take a lot of punches for you to ask for help. And that's why I hate to say it's like asking for help, because there's nothing wrong with any of my clients. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, we need to take away the stigma of asking for help and just say like self-improvement or working on yourself, because a lot of men just wait till they just really, really have no other options before they feel free enough to look internally. So yeah, when they come to me, it's kind of like a Hail Mary of that. They obviously don't know what is wrong, because if they knew, they would fix it. Right? I always say you can't solve what you can't see. And that's why I come in, because I can see what you can't.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting, because when you think about, there's so many things in business and in life that, men or anyone is willing to hire people for, right? Like if you're not a marketing expert, you can hire a marketing person. If you're not, you're not an HR expert, you can hire an HR expert. But, to your point, when it comes to kind of the mental well-being, it's almost, even take away the mental, the physical, right? I mean, people will hire a trainer like they're going out of style, but a mental trainer, for lack of a better way of saying it, right? That seems just so foreign. Why would we spend time, energy, and effort on it. So I think it's interesting to talk about kind of what's that moment of truth. You say rock bottom, to your point. It's not that necessarily there's anything wrong with them. It's that damn it moment of, okay, I got to do something, or this is only going to continue. It's going to actually hold me back and, create long-term issues down the road.
Right. Well, and it's exactly like you guys said earlier. They feel like there's nothing wrong with them. Well, sometimes you go to a personal trainer, not because you're like extremely obese, but just because you know that there's something you don't know about fitness. You know that there's something you don't know about cooking. You know there's something you don't know about taxes. So you go to these different experts because you know there's something you don't know. But when it comes to our own minds, our own relationship patterns, if everything's quote unquote just fine, we say, oh, there's nothing new I could learn, or there's nothing, wrong with me. And you resist. So it's just interesting, like the stigma that society puts on that, as opposed to like, why not just go do it just to see what is there that you're not seeing?
That's a good point. Elise, you talk a lot about trauma on LinkedIn, on your website. I'd love for you to define that for us, because to me, I guess my question is, does it have to be something catastrophic like abuse or losing a loved one, or could it be something really small, maybe in the form of trauma that's holding us back that we don't even really think about?
Right. That's a really great question. Trauma is actually very subjective to the person. And trauma is not actually defined by an event. It's defined by the psychological impact of an event. Mm-hmm. So what could be traumatic for me may not be traumatic for you, and what might be traumatic for you may not be traumatic for me. It's different for everyone. And essentially what I help clients with in session is the behaviors that they've used to cope with those hard events in their life. So I always say we all have trauma of some sort. The trauma itself doesn't necessarily matter as much as how you've been dealing with it for the rest of your life, right? Because the trauma happens to us once. How we deal with it happens to us for the rest of our lives.
Interesting. You also have a blog post where we're talking about the subject that says subconscious trauma and why we should care. What is the difference between subconscious and conscious trauma?
Right. So trauma, if you know that you've been in a car accident or you've witnessed something horrific, like you can generally say like that was pretty traumatic for me. The subconscious trauma is something beneath the surface, something you're unaware of that you don't know. Like you just said, if you don't know that trauma can be a psychological thing as opposed to an event, you may think I've never had any trauma happen to me in my whole life, but you got spanked every single day for nothing. Right? And that could be continuously traumatic for you as a child and you just don't know. So I help unveil the incidents that you may not see as traumatic that have actually altered your psyche.
How hard is it? Like, how far have you gone with some clients where it's like, whoa, like we had to do some really deep digging to find what the root cause was?
I don't want to say it's not necessarily hard, because the patterns always reveal themselves in the present. And when I work with clients, we don't actually, like, the point isn't just to dig all the way back to like the worst moment or something really bad that happened. It's to fix the pattern so that you don't bring it with you from here on out. And actually, when you kind of like relive your trauma over and over again, you re-traumatize yourself. So my goal actually isn't necessarily to always reveal the dark parts. It's just to reveal the pattern enough for the understanding to take hold, for the pattern to be able to change. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So Elise, you mentioned one of the kind of light bulbs for you is when you started to think of the brain differently, right? And the patterns and how to kind of change the patterns. Could you speak a little bit to that? Like just, what have you seen from a pattern perspective? I mean, when I think of patterns historically, I think more of like behavioral patterns, right? So, to your point, like destructive behavior, things where all of a sudden you step back, you're like, why am I even doing this? This is not driving towards anything that I want to do. But could you speak a little bit to more of the from the brain perspective, the patterns and how to kind of rewire your brain that way?
Yeah. So if I'm understanding you, the brain is wired solely for survival, not thriving. Right? So when we're babies, we don't understand how the world works, right? Human babies are like the most useless creatures on the planet. for like 18 years. We don't know how to take care of ourselves, right? We cannot fend for ourselves when we come out of the womb. We literally have to rely on our caregivers to show us how the world works. How do I survive? How do I gain love? How do I gain validation? And we're programmed to survive in that environment, right? So whatever tools our parents have when we're born, and nobody's perfect, so nobody has the perfect toolbox, whatever they're showing us as a display of how do I earn love, acceptance, validation, whatever they're going through, we adapt to that because that is our only option for survival. So even if our parents are abusive or alcoholic or too busy with work to really be emotionally available for us, we will adapt our personality to fit that need to try to gain whatever love and validation we can from them. So just as an example, if our parent is, let's say we have a single parent and they rely on us for everything, our emotional needs, they need us to work an extra job. Like we forego our needs as a child and take on the personality of an adult right away. So then the brain is so efficient, it doesn't think, oh, now that I'm 18 and moved out, I can change this pattern and other people don't need me to do these things. It says, this is how I do this to get love. So for the rest of your life, you will kind of subconsciously take care of people around you, neglect your own needs, feel like you have to be the savior in a situation because that's what you learned as survival, right? So the point that it gets to where you finally think, oh my God, something isn't right here, is when your relationships keep failing and failing and failing and failing. And you're like, I don't know what else to do. So the pattern is revealed in that, right? I say, oh, what's going on in your relationship? Well, I keep meeting this person over and over and over again. And I say, okay, did you have this happen? And it's revealed to them. And then you can say, I don't need to take care of people like that anymore.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
What do you find it is that most men want?
What do they want from coaching?
Yeah. What do they want as an outcome?
Well, in the first session, it's always different than like the middle session or the last session, right? Because when they come to me, like I said, they're at a Hail Mary. So usually the first answers that they give me are like the lowest expectations. Is like, I just want to be happier. I just want to be at peace. I just want more clarity, right? And then once we've gotten that in like the first month, then we change the goal, right? We raise the standard or we raise the bar and it becomes more clear, right? Just more clearly defined visions and versions of, I want to find happiness and peace, and I want to be able to know myself in a way that I can control these things and I'm not, a slave to my subconscious anymore.
Love that.
So Elise, are there kind of low-hanging fruit tips, right? So when you think about kind of taking self-awareness of basically just where you are, right? So I think there's probably a lot of people out there that are, maybe struggling with something, but they don't think it's, maybe they don't think it's a big enough deal, right? To your point, they define trauma as, well, I wasn't in a car accident or nobody died, so suck it up. Like, why stop worrying about it? Are there tips that you've seen to kind of help people to kind of self-assess where they are and when's the time to talk to somebody and to your point, just it's not even about just help. It's right. It's in some ways even just education about how do you think differently about where your head's at.
Well, the one thing I would say to what you just said about it's not that big of a deal, just suck it up. I would say you win no awards for suffering, right? Like no one's going to hand you a trophy for suffering the most. No one's going to hand you a trophy for sucking it up. So if you don't have to suffer, if you don't have to grind through it, why would you? Because you are not winning anything from that. In fact, you're taking away from the joy that you could have, from the success that you could have, from the place that you potentially could be, because your ego wants to say, I suffered the most, so I get a ego award that I can now say to everybody, I stayed up the latest, I worked the hardest, I grinded the most, okay, but you're like literally so unhappy that you lose, like you've won nothing.
Yeah.
So I say, put your ego in check and just take the Advil, just take that. No one wants to hear you complain about your headache, man.
Yeah.
You're not winning anything.
Yeah.
That's right. Elise,
fantastic.
what do you say to those men who, and maybe they are, maybe you reach them and you go through a couple sessions, you're like, you know what, you're really in a good place, like you're doing well. What do you do with those clients who they're the person who's already in the gym, they're the person who's already working on self improvement, they have the self awareness. Where do you go with someone who's in a good place?
Actually, a lot of my clients do have schedules and structures like that, and that's why they're so confused. So those are usually the best clients because they're so focused on actually figuring it out that they do see results very quickly, and they really do the work. So for them, though, they usually haven't been taught the more scientific principles that you learn when you take courses in trauma therapy. So with them, it turns kind of into a real teaching of like, this is how you do this, and it's more logical and less. It's less kind of discovering and figuring it out. It's just teaching them really the principles of this is how you solve this. This is about the physiology of what you're not getting. Have you learned about this? And I kind of teach them the concepts that I've learned, and it becomes more of a teaching environment at that point.
Cool.
So Elise, one of the kind of other things that I thought was interesting you kind of referenced was almost the one of the cycles I feel like a lot of people get into is almost like the blame and shame, right? To your point, like, I love the concept of you don't get an award for suffering. I think that certainly is a nugget to pull out of this. But where does the kind of the mindset of positivity go in? One of the things I see for a lot of people is when they're in that low place, men or women, when they're in that low place, they're in this vicious cycle of like kind of blaming and shaming, right? And in many ways they're blaming and shaming themselves, right? They're not blaming external. And so they just kind of get into that deep hole. If someone, right, if was in that hole, what advice would you give to someone to say, how can you help kind of pull them out of that?
Well, before I give any kind of like advice to my clients, I always just ask them questions to see if they can give themselves advice, right? So the first question I kind of ask is, when did you first experience feeling like you needed to take the blame for something? When did you first experience the need to feel responsible for everything going right? Like what has made you feel like if something doesn't go right, you're bad, that you can't make mistakes, that you have to be perfect? And different realizations will come from different people's life experiences, according to those answers. And so I would just ask the audience who's listening, ask yourself these questions, right? Anytime you're feeling a hard emotion or you're judging yourself viciously, it's usually not your own voice. So who first made you feel like that? Who did you witness doing that to themselves? Sometimes it's not even people doing it to us, but we witnessed our mom being super critical of her own body. We witnessed dad never opening up, never saying I love you, never hugging anyone. So that's just what we do because monkey see, monkey do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's awesome.
Elise, you have some content out there about like vision and strategy and that. I come from a marketing background, and so often I would say, I just want to use the phrase 99% of the time, businesses that struggle with marketing don't have a strategy. And even if they attempt to make one, everything in the strategy is totally made up. It's just arbitrary numbers. And so they're just kind of leading themselves into the same hole they've been in before. How do you find that is a big reason why people just continue to spin their wheels, is because they don't have a vision for what they want. They don't have a plan for how to get there. And is that a part of what you do with your clients?
Absolutely. In the first session, I explain it like this. You have a map on Google, right? You have Google Maps. Well, Google can't possibly tell you how to get to where you're going if you don't know the end point and if you don't know the start point. Like, how are we going to get any direction? So we really have to get clear on what is it exactly that you want if you could have a magic wand and it made everything exactly, like without any limits, right? And then if we're going to be honest, where are we at right now? How are you feeling right now? How can we be totally vulnerable with what we have right now? And then we can build the map along the way. But also, just a follow up to that, I think a lot of people don't know what they want as a vision because they're asking themselves the wrong question. Right? The quality of our answers really depends on the quality of our questions. So a lot of what I do in session is ask them different questions that they haven't been asking themselves. Usually we're spinning in circles because we're like, what is my vision? What do I want? How do I get this? And I'm like, well, do you even want that? Right? Like, is this actually your vision or is it somebody else's vision? Like questions that they just haven't asked themselves because they don't know to ask. Then we get different answers.
Love that.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I just think about, different people we've come across and leaders and things like that, where I'll use fitness as an example, where you talk to a lot of people where it's, I got to get fit. I got to get in the gym. I got to eat healthier. I got to do all that sort of stuff. And then you really talk to them and you're like, no, you don't. Like, why? That's not your goal. Like, you don't.
Right. Like, you don't need a six pack.
Yeah. You don't actually want that. Right. Like, if you think you want that because somebody's telling you that that's the way it should be. But if you don't actually want it, then don't dedicate the energy to it. Right. To your point, stepping back and really understanding it's your life. It's your goal. It's what you want to do. It's not just, well, I'm told this is what I should do and this is how I should do it. No, take a step back and really figure out what do you actually want? What is uniquely you?
Right. Well, and that's why people have the same goals on their, New Year's resolution, right? Every single year, I want to lose 5 pounds. I want to lose 5 pounds. Yeah. Like, actually, you don't because you didn't, and you're not going to. So let's just cross it off the list now and put something else there because it's not something you care about, even to the remotest amount.
Yeah. I was actually talking to one of our sales guys, I think actually just last week, and we were talking about this, and he's like, no, I don't want to give up beer. I don't. So let's not even talk about it. If I don't want to give up beer, I'm never going to have a six pack. So at least not unless he's going to work out a lot more than he does now.
A six pack of beer.
Yep. That's exactly right.
That's the six pack he wants. It's so interesting you mentioned that, Dustin, with the goals, because I found more, not so much goals, but resolutions. Resolutions almost don't work. And a resolution is really more of an idea of it'd be really nice to lose 10 pounds or it'd be really great. But yet the big thing I think missing with even a goal, which is better than a resolution, is what are the actions you're going to take? Ultimately, are you going to take action or not? And then how are you going to actually implement? So an action is great, but are you blocking time on your calendar? So Elise, I'm really curious. How do you go about that with your clients? Because for many years, I've wanted X, but never got it because I didn't put the time in or I didn't have a plan. I was like, oh, it'd be really nice if at the end of the year I made this much money or I could buy a new car. But so what, right?
Right. Well, I mean, you just answered your own question along with what we were just saying.
I have a tendency to do that.
It would be really nice. Well, it'd be really nice to have a butler, but it's not a need.
No.
And if you don't get to the point where it's a need for you, it's a must for you, you have to have it, you're not going to change. You're not going to put in the action. Many people who I meet say, I know exactly what I need to do, right? If you're a little bit overweight, you need to diet. You need to go to the gym. And you're not doing it because A, it's not a priority. B, it would be a nice to have. And C, it's it hasn't gotten to the point where you need to make a change. And this is kind of the thing that I switch in my client's mind is you don't need to get to the point of suffering before you make a decision on something anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So when we clarify what we actually want, it makes those goals clearer. And then we 10x the goals to make them actually worthy of achieving. Because if you just say, oh, I just want to make a little bit of money by the end of the year, I want to have a nice car, that's not enough for you to actually want that thing because it doesn't change your life. If it doesn't change your life, why would you change? If I only want to lose 10 pounds, not really going to make a huge change in my life. But if I want to become a bikini competitor on stage who wins first prize, that's a huge change, dynamic shift in your entire life. Right. So it inspires something different within you to make it actually worthy of changing your comfort zone. Right. If you were instead to say, I'm not going to have a car by the end of the year, I'm going to have a baby. That's huge. That's a big difference. Right. And it forces you to make a change. So you have to make the goal so big, so worthy of changing your life for.
I want to add one more thing to that. So I saw a video just a couple of days ago, and it was Gary Vaynerchuk, and someone had asked him how if he thought that going from 150,000 in revenue to 200,000 in revenue was a good goal, and he said no. The reason because he said you can easily do that by changing one or two things. He said, I want you to think about 250 or 300. And he's like, very clearly, why wouldn't you? She's like, I don't know. And he said, well, is it possible? And she said, well, yeah. He said, well, I want you to set that goal instead. I want you to double your business because you will then apply pressure. You will feel pressure. And when you feel the pressure, it is a higher probability you will work harder to get there because $50,000 is not going to move the needle for you very much. So it's not going to change your life. Why would you do anything really much different? And so I saw that and I was like, damn, you're right. Like, you do raise the bar that high. The actions are going to map to your ambitions. I found that very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And that's just like Gary Vaynerchuk, Grant Cardone. And I would even say like even doubling it is like, I mean, once you get into the Grant Cardone world, then you really like you start being a psychopath. But it's just like, if you know that you have the capacity to work faster, harder, longer when you set your goal super high, why wouldn't you set it to the max? Like, people do things in these increments thinking that that's the best because it's realistic. But the worst thing you can do for yourself is set a mediocre goal and achieve it, because then who cares? You're still not happy. So set the highest possible goal that you can, start sweating, and fast forward the time, just because even if you don't make it at that point, you've surpassed the midline, you've surpassed the low bar, and then you're actually proud of yourself. But we also have this thing as humans where we extend the deadline and we will fill in the gap until we get there. So you're just going to do 50,000 increments. You're just going to do, like every 5 pounds, like obviously don't do anything dangerous to yourself, but you know what I'm saying? Like, set the big goal now, stop waiting for it, and see how fast you can actually get there. Like, challenge yourself.
Right.
It's excellent.
Elise, I'm curious, I see your content on LinkedIn, and I have to imagine a lot of the men who are like, yeah, I want to hire her. The core issue has to be relationships, specifically marriage. I mean, and how does one go about that? Right. I mean, are they open about those things?
They're 100% open. They have no choice but to be open. Like I said, they're the Hail Mary. Like also with my coaching, it's not like a Netflix subscription where you just put $10 at it and then you forget and you don't have to do the work. Like, I've raised the bar. So like, people want to maximize every session. So the first session, they're like, I just got to tell you everything, because if they don't tell me the truth, then I can't help them. Right. So
good point.
Definitely with relationships, it's what these men struggle with, because they've been pigeonholed in society not to address feelings and emotions. And then we come from a long line of generation of parents who didn't address any emotions or feelings. So it's like we are in the generation now where we have to rewrite the rules of how we operate.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned that earlier on, a lot of the core issue is relationships, and it doesn't have to be just marriage. But if you don't mind giving away some of the secret sauce, what are some of the things you coach people on that people can listen today and just take away a few nuggets that maybe they could implement today to build better relationships in the world?
So the number one is always going to be communication. And communication, specifically when it comes to men, is acknowledging your own needs, boundaries, desires, things that you want and need from the relationship. And all of it starts with understanding yourself more. If you grow up in a society that says, don't cry, don't express yourself, just do the work, get it done, usually you don't understand yourself enough to even ask for your needs in a relationship. So you've partnered with someone who usually doesn't ask or doesn't validate your needs, or, has relied on you to just fix everything for them. And so there's a lot of work that goes into just understanding yourself and understanding your needs, and then learning how to ask for that in your relationship.
I love this stuff because
Yeah.
I think a lot of men want to know how women think. or they want to. I mean, I truly believe that, but I also think that there are a lot of men, even the most masculine men, that are like, I secretly want to be a better friend, a better husband. I want to be more present, and I think there are men that are just looking for tips out there, all over the place.
Yeah.
So
no, I think it's going great.
Do you guys want to know how women think?
Oh, 100%. I don't think that'll ever happen, though. Hey, have you ever seen the movie What Women Want with Mel Gibson?
Yeah. And then he tries on the pantyhose and gets electrocuted. And
that came out probably when I was a junior in high school. And
you tried it?
No.
Tried to cog through the Rain Man?
But I got to thinking, I'm like, how amazing would it be to have that superpower?
Yeah, but that's the problem. Is that every man and woman tries to figure out what the other person is thinking instead of just remaining authentically within themselves. And instead of just being two separate people who align because they understand their own needs, boundaries, goals, whatever, they just abandon themselves to try to figure out the other. So you have two lost people trying to like work it out. And then you get in this really dysfunctional dynamic that causes us to just constantly feel withdrawn and lost and searching for something. So
you're saying men should stop trying to worry about what is my wife thinking?
Yeah, 100%. Like 100%. This is exactly what, if you worried more about how you could feel fulfilled in the relationship and then just asked your partner, how can I best support you right now? Instead of trying to think about it and figure it out and solve the problem before she tells you, she will stop getting pissed off because you're not being present and doing what she's actually, because women will tell you exactly what we want. We tell you exactly, we're talking all the time. And you zone out because you're just trying to bypass the talking part. You're trying to bypass the hard emotions and get right to the point where you don't have to deal with the pain, right? Yeah. You have to allow your partner to be okay in their own emotions and be okay in your own emotions, and then just ask for what you want and say, like, I don't have space to be able to like listen to this right now. Or like, I want to talk about this, but like at a different time because like my head is filled with work stuff. Like, how can we actually communicate where we're at so our partner feels our presence instead of feels our need for them to be okay?
That's good. I love that. I love
that.
Are
we recording right now? This
is
the part you should insert this into the podcast. This is the juiciest part.
That was amazing. That might be one of the best segments for entertainment purposes.
For sure.
I love that.
Put that first.
I could lead with
Mel Gibson on the cover with the pantyhose.
Yeah. I'm going to leave out the part that I've always wanted to know.
That's what you should put first. I mean, you should really put...
but, in full disclosure, though, I mean, I'm not perfect. I actually, when I wrote my first book, I wrote a chapter about perfectly imperfect. And I think that it's okay to not be perfect. Like, we always like wondering, what are people thinking? How can I do better? How can I do this? And I think if you can live in a world where perfect doesn't exist, because I don't believe it does. I think good is good enough for a lot of different reasons. And rather than going down that rabbit hole, I think if you can just put your best self out there and be your best self without trying, people will see you as good enough. And I think good enough is great. And I think great is the pinnacle and perfect is ridiculous because it doesn't exist. And we end up in this point of diminishing returns, or we work so hard on something that we spend twice the amount of time and we end up getting nothing else done. So, to me is just be your best, and the best is always going to be good enough, if not better. All right, Elise, final thoughts, final takeaways for all the guys or even the women out there listening today.
Sprung that on me.
Yeah. What's the one takeaway that you want people to go with and go home and think about?
I usually try to choose something new every time I end a podcast. So
no pressure.
Today I would say, always, this is going to be like unpopular opinion, but
I like
put
that.
You first.
Oh, yes.
Because there's a famous speaker who says, usually we say, I'll take care of you so you can take care of me. And it's like, I'll take care of me for you, and I need you to take care of you for me. And I think people forget that the more aligned we are with our desire and our goals, and the more better we feel about our finances, the better we feel about our own body, the better we feel about, living a life we love. You don't have to get angry at the little things your partner is doing anymore, because you're no longer looking to them to fill gaps in your life. And you can still need them and say, I need you to be my partner, but your happiness no longer depends on what they're freaking doing in their life, because you don't feel fulfilled anymore. Right? So the more aligned you feel with your life, the more authentic you can be about how you're living it, and the more aligned you'll be with the people in it.
I love that. I don't know where I've gotten this from, but I've been saying lately that if you can't take care of yourself, you certainly won't be able to take care of other people. And so I think you have to be a little selfish at times, because that self-care goes a long way when you're serving others. And that could be just serving your clients at work, could be serving your team as a leader. It comes in a lot of different ways. So I absolutely love that message. Elise, let's put a bow on this. I'd love to ask you more questions, but for sake of time, I would love for you to tell our listeners where they can find you and what you have available for products and services right now.
You can find me anywhere social media is at. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and my services are only on my website, www.elisemicheals.com. I just have one-on-one sessions right now. There's a clarity call and there's my one-on-one session package, but you can only book a clarity call. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is because I have some fake accounts who have copied me, and they will DM you for a tarot reading. And I promise you that is not me.
You don't do tarot? I'm out.
I mean, I do have tarot cards, but I'm not fishing in the DMs to be like, hey, grand rising. So honestly, if you buy from them, that's a lesson you have to learn the hard way. That ain't me.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time. We appreciate you being on the show. That was incredibly insightful. I can't wait to go back and listen to that again. Hopefully we'll have a chance to get you back on the show in the near future.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. For everybody out there listening today, thank you for your ears. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. If you're serious about raising the bar in your personal and professional life and willing to go all in on your success, head over to hustleleaders.com. Here you can get access to our Hustle Productivity ebook, attend our Hustle Masterclass, or challenge yourself to the 30-day Hustle Challenge. Pairing these tools and training with the Hustle Nation podcast will help you advance to a whole new level. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.